Hey, it's your old pal Lucid Stew again, and we're going to take a look at a possible Brightline expansion in Florida. Brightline is a passenger rail service that currently extends 235 miles from Miami to Orlando and reaches speeds up to 125 miles per hour. The company is talking about expanding to Tampa. I covered that in my Florida corridor video about 2 years ago. Now we'll take it a step further and investigate what an expansion to Jacksonville might look like and compare it to existing Brightline service. Let's take a look at the metros involved. Orlando has a metro population of 2.9 million, making it the 20th largest in the United States. It is, of course, a tourist mecca, home to Disney World, the Universal Resorts, and many other tourist attractions. Brightline's Orlando station is located at Orlando International Airport, 9 miles from downtown Orlando and the same distance from the resort area. Extension of Brightline in cooperation with the local commuter agency Sunrail is currently being studied. That study is expected to be completed in 2027. That would potentially extend Brightline 18 miles to the area around Disney World somewhere around 2030. On the other end of our route is Jacksonville. Jacksonville is 125 miles north of Orlando as the crow flies. It has a metro population of 1.8 million. That makes it the 38th largest in the country. Jacksonville is near the border with Georgia, and it is the southernmost city on the Federal Railroad Administration's Southeast High-Speed Rail Corridor. That could potentially connect Florida to Atlanta, Washington, D.C., and the Northeast Corridor by rail at 110 miles per hour or more. Between the two is the Daytona Beach Metro that has a population of 740,000. The area is probably best known for Daytona Speedway and the Daytona 500 NASCAR race, which actually used to run on the beach. All three metros are among the fastest growing in the country by percentage. They are also quite sprawling, so their populations aren't very concentrated. For instance, Orlando's core is about 1/3 the size of those in Charlotte, North Carolina and St. Louis, Missouri, despite the three metros being of similar populations. We're going to start at Orlando International Airport. Brightline meets the airport tram there. It's likely that Sunrail, Orlando's regional rail system, will also stop there within 5 or 10 years. Brightline is slow through the airport property, and then the service hits Brightline's new Class 7 track between the airport and the city of Cocoa, 35 miles to the east. Class 7 means the right-of-way is completely grade separated and sealed to keep people out. Class 7 rail right-of-way has a top speed of 125 miles per hour. For this example, I'm going to stick with Brightline's current paradigm of running up to 125 miles per hour with Siemens Venture cars pulled by Siemens Charger diesel-electric locomotives. I don't think Brightline is likely to electrify in Florida anytime soon. 125 miles per hour is usually only considered higher speed on new track, but will entertain a high-speed option later. After 25 miles of running next to State Road 528, we have a choice to make. Hang a left at State Road 407 or continue on the Florida East Coast Railway right-of-way in Cocoa. I chose Florida 407. The immediate victim of that choice is service in Titusville, which I will skip. Keep in mind, many options exist. This is just one potential scenario. We'll transition to Florida 407 in a higher speed curve and then quickly transition into the Interstate 95 right-of-way. Why I-95? Because Brightline is often limited to 79 miles per hour on FECR right-of-way, and I-95 to Daytona Beach is pretty quick. FECR also runs pretty close to the ocean here, which is a major long-term potential problem. I-95 is pretty straight, and it has 60 to 80 feet of room to spare on either side, so it works. For a clue of how Brightline might handle a stretch of I-95, let's look at what they did with Florida 528. A lot of I-95 interchanges north of Cocoa are these tight diamonds. When possible, Brightline would go around. When more constrained by development, they would go through. More typical intersections, they'd likely go around if they could. Some embankment and a short bridge is quicker and cheaper than a long viaduct. After 50 miles of that, this route would wind up in Daytona Beach at a somewhat tricky intersection of I-95 with both Interstate 4 and US 92, a mile and a quarter apart. This could be handled with a couple of miles of high viaduct. However, that could pose a proximity problem for one of the runways at Daytona Beach International Airport. If that's the case, it's possible to go around on about 5 miles of new right-of-way closer to the ground, a quarter mile further from the runway. In the same area, we would switch sides on the freeway and come into our elevated Daytona Beach station at LPGA Boulevard. This is about 4 miles from the airport, 5 miles from downtown Daytona Beach, has good freeway access, and about 200 acres to develop. Since we've made it to Daytona Beach, let's check travel times. From Orlando, I have our 125 mile per hour train traversing the 87 miles in 56 minutes. That would be an average of 93 miles per hour. That's about the same time it takes to drive, and get used to that statement. Out of Daytona Beach, there are a couple of curves that would keep speed under 110 miles per hour for 8 miles, and then it's back to 125 for 17 miles with no issues before pulling into Palm Coast at I-95 and Matanzas Woods Parkway. Palm Coast is a city of 100,000 that is part of the Daytona Beach Metro. Here there is a 160-acre plot of land to develop. My logic is playing to the modus operandi of Brightline's parent, that is real estate development driven by passenger rail. Mixed-use development around a Brightline station in Palm Coast could serve as an instant downtown, which the city currently doesn't have. There are also another 300 acres within a mile of that site that could be developed. It is 27 miles between Daytona Beach and Palm Coast. That's a decent intercity distance. I have that taking 20 minutes for an average of 81 miles per hour. 5 miles north of this Palm Coast site, I'm electing to hop into the Florida East Coast Railway right-of-way. Brightline's parent company used to own FECR, and as a result, Brightline has trackage rights. I'm going to assume a speed limit on that of 110 miles per hour in rural areas and 79 miles per hour in developed areas with no grade separation, since that is the paradigm for Brightline from Miami to Cocoa currently. After leaving the interstate, the FEC route is rural for 8 miles before reaching the outskirts of St. Augustine. Then our train would travel through suburban St. Augustine at grade for 7 miles before reaching my chosen station site at the corner of King and Ponce de Leon. The city of St. Augustine only has a population of 15,000, but the area has a population similar to Palm Coast. It is also a tourist destination, being one of the older European settlements in the Western Hemisphere and possessing a beautiful and charming downtown. Our 13-acre station site would be on the other side of the San Sebastian River, about 3/4 of a mile from the center of downtown. The area around the station has a strong beach town vibe and seems like a good place to drop off tourists if the pedestrian connection to downtown were improved. From Palm Coast to St. Augustine, it is 22 miles. I have that taking 19 minutes for an average of 70 miles per hour. Speed out of St. Augustine to the north would be slow for 4 miles before opening up on the way to Jacksonville. Things are pretty rural for about 15 miles until entering the Jacksonville suburbs. There is some grade separation here, but it's not consistent enough to make a difference. After 15 more miles through the suburbs at 79 miles per hour, the route enters the urban part of Jacksonville and then crosses the St. Johns River on a double-tracked movable bridge. There isn't much room for a train station downtown, so I like a weird little 3-acre strip next to the convention center that looks like it used to be a siding. Perhaps Brightline could go vertical above this, sort of like their Miami station. In addition to the convention center, this site features good access to medium-density housing and is also across the street from a transit center that features a large bus depot and a station for Jacksonville's weirdo automated people mover. It's actually not a bad location considering it's actually not a good location. But we've made it to Jacksonville from Orlando. Let's check those travel times. It is 37 miles from St. Augustine to Jacksonville. I have that taking 32 minutes for an average of 69 miles per hour. Orlando to Jacksonville is 173 miles by this routing. Total travel time is 2 hours 10 minutes for an average of 80 miles per hour with the 3 stops. That's a little faster than Brightline Miami to Orlando, which averages about 70 miles per hour, and about the same as what they're planning between Orlando and Tampa on average. 2 hours 10 minutes is competitive with driving. There are no non-stop flights between the two areas. Now let's talk Turkey. Brightline's 170-mile expansion from West Palm Beach to Orlando cost them $6 billion. For the 173 miles from Orlando to Jacksonville, I have an estimated cost of $8.2 billion. Let's quickly examine a slightly different option that avoids St. Augustine. North of Palm Coast, we would stay in the Interstate 95 right-of-way instead of diverging to FECR. I-95 is pretty straight into the St. Augustine area. I have the St. Augustine area station at the junction of I-95 and State Road 16, where about 160 acres is available to develop, similar to Palm Coast and Daytona Beach. This site is 6 miles from downtown St. Augustine. North of there, we would continue along I-95, crossing through complex intersections with State Road 9B and I-295 before hooking up with FECR right-of-way 11 miles south of downtown Jacksonville. From there, things would be the same. I have that option as 8 minutes faster and costing about $500 million more due to several intersection crossings along the freeway. Now let us discuss electrified true high-speed rail top speed 200 miles per hour. The first 9 miles out of Orlando International are the same, constrained to 110 miles per hour, unfortunately wasting the acceleration of our potential Siemens American Pioneer 220. Once past some curves, our train would quickly reach our maximum operational speed of 200 miles per hour with minimal alignment adjustments. We're looking at about 100 miles of high-speed travel within the 172 miles of our last I-95 route. High speed will be attained between the urbanized areas. In rural areas, constraining curves can be broadened to retain full speed. Speed through urbanized areas would mostly be in the 90 to 125 mile per hour range, sticking to the freeway right-of-way. I'm cutting out those stops for Palm Coast and St. Augustine. Those would be served by more regionally focused trains like the ones we've discussed previously. For Orlando to Daytona Beach, that would produce an approximate time of 44 minutes, a 118 mile per hour average, and a savings of 12 minutes over diesel electric. The 172 miles from Orlando to Jacksonville I have at 1 hour and 25 minutes for an average of 122 miles per hour with the stop. Not the fastest high-speed rail, but real and true. That would be 35 minutes faster than our hypothetical diesel electric service and driving. About 10 minutes of that comes from not stopping 2 additional times. In terms of cost, we have deviations from the freeway to cover as well as electrification, including 28 miles of existing Brightline right-of-way. Before we get to that, let's quickly review my cost estimation algorithm and some real-world sample cases to show that it produces reasonable ballpark results. With that out of the way, I have 172 miles of high-speed rail between Orlando and Jacksonville, Florida, at a cost of $16 billion. Slightly less than twice the cost of a slower speed diesel electric equivalent. To summarize, number 1, this looks pretty doable. Number 2, cost to Jacksonville would be about twice what it will cost Brightline to get to Tampa. and the Tampa metro is currently about 500,000 people larger. This makes it obvious why a Jacksonville connection is lower priority. Number 3, considering the potential connection to parts further north, this is probably still worth doing if Brightline can stay afloat that long. Number 4, the population of this area is growing by about 25% per decade, and service doesn't require a lot of land, so it will be even more attractive if and when Brightline is able to get around to it. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. What are your thoughts on Brightline and this potential connection to Jacksonville? Will they survive the coming years, and should they eventually expand north? Let me know in the comments. Also, make sure to check out the various additional ways you can support this content. The super thanks button below the video awaits your click. I also have a poster store where you can purchase fine retro railroad reproduction images such as these. But that's all for now. Until next time, I'll see you on that big beautiful freeway.